Welcome to the show, James. I think that's a fabulous opportunity to have you on the show. I can't believe that we're having this discussion, but that will add so much value to me, as always, from you. So welcome to the show.
That's really kind, Reda. It's an absolute delight to be with you again, to see you catch up again anyway, and even more intriguing to see where the conversation goes in this format. So really looking forward to it.
Thank you. Now, the common question, I think you got this question in multiple occasions. What is the relation between philosophy background, being a musician in some of the days, and a finance background and finance leader at the same time? How you came up with this mix between the philosophy, music, and finance?
So really, I guess there are a few factors around this. And what really comes out of all of them is they all really give me joy, and in different ways. So there are things which touch me deeply, engage me, and where also, in each of them, they're all about dealing with other people. Because this may sound a bit odd about finance in particular, and possibly about philosophy, but none of those are really worth doing on your own. All of those you need to do with other people. I think maybe at a slightly different level, what they have in common is something really intriguing, that they both require discipline. So let's think about that. So philosophy is embedded in logic. It's about really profound, sharp thinking. You have to think in a very disciplined way, otherwise it's just talking. Music, you can be as inspired as you like, but unless you really know your instrument, unless you've got the technique, unless you understand the harmonic structures, nothing happens. So you've got to be disciplined. Finance, of course, everyone thinks, sure, you've got to be disciplined, and they think that's all that finance is. But then with the philosophy is something you do with other people. You think of philosophers on their own, but actually it's most alive when you do it with other people. So it's all about how can you bring your thoughts to life in a way which gets a spark off the person you're talking to, which then creates all kinds of stimulus that as you talk, the thing grows and grows, and you each provoke the other to arrive at a more interesting place. And that requires creativity, requires you to be able to express yourself in an engaging way. That's the unexpected side of philosophy in my mind, is this sense of human interaction and pushing each other to get to a really unexpected point. And music goes without saying, the magic of music, that it's one thing to, since I retired, wrong word, since I changed how I work, I've been spending lots of my time going back, learning scales, learning jazz chords, learning techniques, refining my techniques, and actually going through exercises, which I lasted when I was 13 years old. But I now find that things I thought I couldn't do, after I've practiced for 10 days, they fall under my fingers and I can be even more creative because they give me the space to be more creative. The discipline gives me the space to be creative and know when I can break the rules and how. And that's also true of finance in a strange way, and this is what no one's going to be expecting to hear. The finance is all about, this is how it works, these are the rules, it all sits like this. But actually the magic is when, again, you're dealing with other people, and by listening to them, all we really do in finance is we paint in numbers. So it's the opposite of painting by numbers when you have a picture with the numbers already written in and you colour them in. In finance, we describe things using numbers. And the magic is when you can explain that to other people, hear what they're saying. Maybe they don't understand the numbers so well. They might understand what those numbers represent. It's about sales, thinking about what you've been publishing. It's about sales. It's about cost of sales. What's going on here? And the magic is when you can get those two together. So you express the numbers in a way which prompts them to say, but this thing happened yesterday. Is that good or is that bad? Where do we take it? And then you realize that your assumptions in the numbers didn't reflect that reality. So together you spark each other and you build something which is far bigger than either of you could do on your own. So in each of these three, there's this combination of discipline, quite analytic, but at the same time, when you really get that right, once you've got that as your foundation, you can then expand into being creative. You have to know the rules to break the rules.
Okay. You have to know the rules to break the rules. That's lovely from a finance leader.
Yeah, and I don't know the rules of podcasting, so I'm looking forward to experimenting and breaking some of the rules of podcasting.
Feel free to break all the rules of the podcasting. That's completely fine. But based on that, do you think anyone with philosophy background, since philosophy, as you said, is the art of dealing and communicating with people, understanding people quickly, do you think anyone with a philosophy background can succeed in any majors because he knows how to deal with people? Do you think this is the secret subject that everyone should join and be able to communicate and deal and convince anyone that they are very strong on that? Fake it till you make it, but they make it very authentic to the level that they can manage it. Do you think so?
So, yeah, I take issue with fake it till you make it. A lot of philosophers go on that. And in fact, I've been doing quite interesting exercise around what I was calling paraphilosophy, which that's several more podcasts we need to do together to get there. I think the key, my view of education, the reason I studied philosophy is philosophia, the love of wisdom. And it felt to me, I'd studied Latin and ancient Greek when I was at school. So when I went to university, I wanted to kind of finish that. And I'd been reading the Greek philosophers. And this idea that this represented the end point of my education, love of wisdom, where do you go further than the love of wisdom? That for me was really important. I absolutely loved every second that I spent studying philosophy. In fact, I'm going to be doing a master's in philosophy from October. So that's one of my other many plans at the moment.
This October.
Is I'm going to start postgraduate philosophy at whatever I'm going to be then, 59, because I want more. I want to go back to that buzz of learning something, of my head hurting from thinking, which is what philosophy does. Reading the texts I have to read before. Wow, it really stretches you. And I love that. But equally, I've got friends. My wife loves mathematics and is excited by how mathematics work and how it fits together. And I look a bit blank when she talks about this, but really powerful for her. Linguists, I have friends who are linguists, and the joy of getting deeply into a language and profoundly understanding it. I think the most important thing, in my mind, in terms of that higher education point, is to do something you love that trains your mind to be able then to adapt to new situations which come up. I have a friend who his whole career was in the diplomatic service, and he worked in very difficult countries, mostly in Africa and the Middle East. Wonderful at dealing with heads of state and navigating the difficulties of that. His speciality, his degree, had been in 17th century Spanish poetry. That was what he focused on. But within that, what he'd done was train his mind and understand it and think about it and really refine his thinking. And he was then able to apply that in everything that he came to. So I think for me, the key of education is to get to the point where you've almost exhausted yourself in terms of taking on classic education. So you can then go out into the world and apply that and test it and use it. And I think that's powerful. And one of the things that strikes me a lot is, and this is certainly true of music, of philosophy, and of finance, the more you dig into it, the more you discover that you can do. And the more it opens it up. And look, we talk about finance. The truth is that I stopped studying maths when I was, I think, 15. When I started work, I was awful. I had difficulty calculating a percentage. But the reality is, in finance, we don't really, unless you get into really extreme finance, banking stuff and all those derivatives, you add, you subtract, you multiply, and you divide.
True.
And we can all do that.
True.
Philosophers, not so much sometimes, but everyone else can do it. It's what you've learned at school. And the key thing is then getting the concepts and being able to apply those concepts in a thoughtful way, having the discipline to do that so that it's all right, and then leverage off that to create insights and move knowledge forward, move understanding forward, move business understanding forward. I think for me that's the essence, is that in a funny kind of way, philosophy and music and finance also have in common, they're all a bit mystical. That philosophy, wow, what the hell is that? To be or not to be, I exist, I think, therefore I am. This is kind of weird stuff. We're not allowed to do that, except very late at night. Music, again, music's difficult. You must sit, they beat you while you're learning, and you have to learn your scales and do things. Finance, I don't know anything about finance. It's not true of any of them. The reality is, once you step over that doorstep and immerse yourself in it and open your mind to it, they're all actually things that step by step you can go through. And of the three, finance is by some way the easiest.
Wow. So for finance or non-finance, you're saying that out of philosophy and music, finance can be the easiest out of these two?
Far, far, far.
Okay.
If I can do it, this is very simple. I've used this throughout my career. If I can do the maths required for finance, no one has any excuses.
Okay. That's a beautiful introduction for non-finance, for non-finance. Because the perception that finance is a very complex subject. You see a lot of numbers. People are scared sometimes of the numbers. So not numbers in general. They look at the numbers in the shape of the format of the P&L, period comparison. And then they have very hard terminology to digest and understand what does it mean, and the linkage between whatever we discuss as a number with the real operation and action on ground. So this is how we're driving at this program, and I'm happy that you're bringing this clarity. And I keep saying that it's all about subtraction and addition and multiplication, as simple as that.
Wow.
Exactly. It doesn't show that it's extremely complex that people got perceived, and this is one of the objectives of this program. Now back to philosophy.
Right.
So in philosophy, I cannot run away from philosophy. But you said that it's never too late, even if you're not a major philosophy. And if you're engineering, business, science, whatever your background, you can have your own philosophy and make sure that whatever you gain as a knowledge in your study, to use it to support you to grow and succeed in life. That's how you're saying. It doesn't have to study. Definitely studying philosophy will give you a deep understanding and challenging yourself, as you said. Very big questions like closed doors. Never ever ask this question. This is what philosophy can. But whenever you go and get whatever you said in philosophy as a concept, as a way of thinking, you can use it to use whatever skill you have and whatever gaps you have and whatever solid background you have, and know how to deal with people. And it will help you as a philosophy of life, as a philosophy of understanding your strengths and your weakness point, to deal and succeed with people. You agree with me?
Yeah, that's very well put. The essence of it is about disciplined, logical analysis and argument. And really is something which is relevant in every part of our lives, whether we're trying to get the children to go to bed on time or get in the bath or whatever the other tasks are. Actually, that's one occasion where philosophy is useless. Let's be clear about that. Parenting and philosophy, it's quite tough. But otherwise, one of the things that philosophy teaches you to do is to, either when you're writing, actually also, because so much of it is about discussing, arguing with other people, to hear what you're saying and to hold yourself accountable for the integrity, for the logic, for the coherence of what you're saying. And in that respect, it's a great discipline. And you don't have to read Plato, you don't have to read Aristotle or Kant or Hegel or Schopenhauer to do that. It's worth a try. Some of them I don't recommend, but it's worth maybe looking at summaries of people and thinking, wow, getting your mind to stretch around consciousness. Consciousness is one of the great challenges. This whole idea of the essence of understanding that you are an existing person who feels things. Immensely complex concept once you start unpicking it and testing it. But just dipping into it and reading a few of the concepts around it is really helpful then just to test your mind, test how you can really think through what's important, what's not important, what's a legitimate argument, what isn't. And if you think about business, finance to business, and the two, finance is the bloodstream of business in many ways, then what your generation are going to be facing, and the generation that follows you, Reda, is the ethical dimension having a relevance in business which has never been there before, which is fantastic. But actually ethics is really difficult. Maybe we'll come on to it. I was mentioning I was in Syria last week and looking at the effect of sanctions. And I have a strongly held personal view on this, but actually being there and seeing it happening, I realized that the headline of my view, which is that sanctions are inhumane, barbaric, and ineffective, just to get it out there. Thank you for giving me the platform. The headline of that is all very well, but you need to then unpick it and kind of forget that as a headline, because the headline isn't helpful. You have to start really thinking deeply into it, making sure you get exposure to what that looks like in reality, and working out what about this does some good, what does bad, what is unpredictable, what has an intention which it doesn't deliver, which is certainly the case in that area. And I think with the state of the planet, what we're continuing to do with the planet, thinking, how do we do business in a way which is ethical? And can we really stand by what we're saying? I also have a very strong position on carbon credits. I find that a comforting but not very robust concept, personally. As the world is going to be, as business is going to be, we must confront ourselves as individuals with those questions to be confident that what we're doing is something that we can go home to our children and talk about with real comfort in the pit of our stomach that I'm doing the right thing.
Okay.
So that's another comfort of philosophy. Ethics is just going to get more and more important in business lives, in everyday lives. The test of, have I sorted out my recycling properly? Am I going to bother to go to the recycling bins, or am I just going to quietly slide it away? And holding yourself accountable for those things, that's ethics. It applies in everyday life, and it's a great discipline to have.
So that will lead us to another subject, which is ethics in everyday lives. Okay, so ethics in everyday lives should link it with your purpose, because your purpose should be around whatever you agree on action on a single day, every single day. So I believe from a philosophy background, you should have the perfect purpose ever, because you ask it the unquestioned, the very hard question that non-philosophy background ask it themselves, right? You did that. Who I am, what is this? Is that like the basic foundation philosophy is asking all the questions. There is no red line. There is nothing called in philosophy, don't ask this question, right? This is
right. You set the bar very, very high on this one. This question, I'm having to think very quickly as we go through this one.
I'm giving you the room to think about that.
Just carry on talking for about 20 minutes.
What is your purpose in life?
My purpose in life is to create the impossible from the unexpected.
The impossible.
To create the impossible
from the unexpected. Can you elaborate more?
No, that's very clear.
Let's see.
Well, I think that the first thing is I think a purpose needs to have two things. It needs to have content which really profoundly resonates with you. And I think it also needs to have some poetry. And poetry does two things. One, it means you can say it immediately in this way. It lives for you. It's a pleasure to say. And I love that just as a little phrase. It gives me happiness. But the other is that the poetry brings it to life. It makes it real. Whereas if you have a very dry purpose which goes into 6 lines and you have to think about what was point 7, then it's quite hard to be there. So I think a purpose, for it to live, has to be relatively brief. And so create the impossible from the unexpected. It took me a long time and many iterations to get to this. I think the starting point was at some point where I had others. There's a beautiful quote from Albert Camus, the existential French writer, who said, who talked about his endless summer. He says, I found in myself an endless summer which was able to, something along the lines of banish the winter whenever its frosty fingers crept in, something along those lines. Loved it. I think that is a bit of what I should be doing. And invincible summer is what I like to bring to conversations. Sometimes a bit of winter as well. But, and that was great, but it wasn't actually quite me. And my wife and I were talking, and it was really about my choice of what I do for work, and that I love places which are difficult environments. I'm absolutely fascinated by areas where there is conflict and how one can get into the conflict. And of course, when you're working, if you have a difficult environment and there's conflict of various kinds, then getting a result is really hard. And she was saying, why don't you just take an easy job at some point? Why you choose to take on roles where the odds are stacked up against hitting your targets? Why do you do that? Why don't you just select somewhere where it's predictable? Which I thought was a great question, because I've dragged my family around with me. They've been around the places that I've been working with me. And that was when I really had to dig deep so that I could express to her in a way which absolutely came from the heart and which she could hear with her heart what it was about. And that what makes me want to wake up, what gets my energy really flying, is to have maybe a situation which is unexpected, which you wouldn't expect to happen, to grab that situation and see what it can create. And again, mentioning travel. I love one of the beauties of being in Damascus, and people would stop us on the streets. I don't have many tourists now. And you start an instant conversation. And you can either just say, hello, how are you? And you separate, or you can scratch at the conversation and see where can we take this? How can we make this completely chance encounter something which we both leave feeling, oh, that was special. And so this rather grand, impossible from the unexpected, actually, it can be a tiny thing. So sometimes even just, sometimes when I walk in the morning with my dog, and there are people who I don't think are going to smile at me and they're not going to say good morning, and I need good mornings coming back at me. So I really have to work a bit at people and really hit them with a kind of killer smile and try not to make the good morning aggressive so that they respond, trying to land it. And then you get that moment where you break through and it's just a smile and it's just a hello. But when you look round, you see that someone is walking a little bit more straightly and there's a little bit more of a swing in how they're going, and trying to create those tiny miracles of connection is something which I find immensely moving. And you can grab enormous challenges. This afternoon, I was looking at a wonderful agribusiness opportunity in Southern Africa with some friends. It looks impossible. So, yes.
You run away. Exactly.
How can we make this work?
And unexpected.
Absolutely. And then the conversation gets going and your heart starts pumping and you can't, for me, I can't resist being in it. I do understand for other people this doesn't work. Other people want a different atmosphere and thrive in it. And God knows the world doesn't need many of me. But we need this mix. And so what I love about this, I don't know how often I hear it in my head, but I love that idea of just giving a little push and seeing what's inside this door.
After explaining this, I only now understand a few situations that we had before whenever there was impossible something to happen. And then once it happened, you go and stretch further even before that, beyond that.
Yeah, push it harder.
Exactly.
It's amazing what can happen.
Yeah. But quickly, because I cannot get enough of this discussion, but bear with me. The last question I have in this section. When you say unexpected, it seems you love to deal with unexpected, right? This is getting the word impossible out of unexpected. These two words somehow trigger your energy to go in. Why exactly these two words drive your energy, wherein other people turn them off? The minute you tell to someone, this is impossible, or this is unexpected, they need everything to be planned and aware. Especially in disruptive world, I think you're the right fit in this environment because many cases are impossible and everything is unexpected as we speak now. So what is your view on that? Why, especially for you love to deal with the impossible, and the minute you hear the word unexpected, you know how to deal with it. Where other people, whenever they hear this word, they're not excited to deal with it. They are avoiding it, to be honest.
Yeah, I think that's the beauty of humanity. That one of the things I'm absolutely obsessed by is diversity is spoken about a lot. I think one of the angles that we miss on diversity is looking at people's personalities and where we each have spikes. And my particular spike is, that looks messy. Let me go in and play with it. And I guess part of it is still a 6-year-old in here somewhere, which continues to drive me. I have a very strong inner child. I love play. I like to disrupt things. I like happiness and noise. That gives me energy. So there's a bit of that inner child coming through. And there's also this, I love conflict. Contradiction. Maybe let's say contradictions. Exactly. Conflict has an aggression around it, which sometimes I like, but I think more, I like contradiction. I like tension. I like, how do I unravel this? I'm not particularly interested in puzzles, but I like the kind of mental conflict, psychological conflict, disagree, dialectic, the Marxist technique of how you progress, and philosophical technique of how you progress argument. I think the power of disagreement and turning that into agreement is just incredible. It's a miracle. This idea that contradiction brings something which is even better than either of the first two ideas. I think that means you can be a magician every day. If you can find a way to do that, start off with disagreement, turn it into Yes. And then what about? And the two of you build it. That's the unexpected. And everyone loves good surprises. I sometimes quite enjoy more alarming surprises.
It depends.
In business, I really like good surprises. Let's be clear. You remember that.
I know.
But I think there's something about that. Yeah, for me, it's about my inner child. My inner child wants to play and wants surprises and to engage with things and see what you can create from them. I'm staying happily in contact with that child, that inner child in me, because that's what gives me joy. And everyone should do it. I think one of the realities of the world with with what we're doing now, for example, where we have this endless bombardment of information, in general information we agree with, which is something really difficult for us to manage. So, it's extraordinary as you go through whatever your various sources of information are, and your views get reinforced and reinforced and reinforced and reinforced. I think that's really unhealthy. It kind of feels good. But actually taking moments to reflect, to have contradictory conversations, to test it out, I think that's where real magic lies in terms of being confident that you're living a life which is good for you. And if you reflect, it may turn out that you're at your best when things are calm and predictable. And that's great. And the world needs people who are like that. Massively. It's really important to keep things functioning smoothly. And the world needs a few hooligans who will come in and see what happens when you take it apart, or what happens if you disagree. And I think it's that mix. How do we manage to get communities in business, outside business, where we have spiky personalities, we live up to our strengths, we see how far we can take our strengths, but we respect each other in doing it. If someone has an opposite strength to you, just think about how powerful that is combined, rather than letting the two of them crash into each other.
That's the beauty of humanity, I think.
Absolutely.
I agree. Of humanity and making the impossible out of the unexpected. That led us to change management and digital finance. So you're always enthusiastic related to the change and digital finance. The combination between digital finance and change, because to implement digital finance, you need to be aware how to implement change and change management at the same time. So both are linked together. Why you always used to be very enthusiastic and passionate about digital finance in particular? It's not like, when you used to do it, it's not like your core KPI or target. You're doing it with passion. You want to do it. You want to drive it. You came out of your traditional particular role or job description, and you go beyond that and drive it like everywhere.
Great question. And I think maybe that my grasp of digital is so limited that what I could bring was passion. I couldn't bring a great deal of expertise, but I could bring a lot of passion, a lot of conviction, a lot of enthusiasm to it. And actually, one of the things that led me to stop work when I did, or stop traditional corporate, conventional work when I did, was feeling that the pace of change was accelerating so fantastically and so excitingly that actually I needed to get a taste of that without the buffer of corporate between me and what was making it happen. But one of the things I absolutely loved about a point in my career, when I've been working for 30 years, more than 30 years, was that I think more changed in terms of how I could best do my job, if that makes sense, as CFO, in the last 5 years of my career than in the preceding, let's say, 30. So, yeah, when I started work, email was new. And there were horses and all those things, wrote with feathers, But email was a privilege when I started work. So that's where I come from. And in spite of the scale of that change already, when I first went to Poland to work in Poland, there was one computer in the accounts team and one lady who could use it. Everything else was done on huge sheets of paper. When you had too many numbers, you glued another sheet of paper on the top. So when you've seen all of that and you're thinking, wow, this is the pace of change. But when I think digital finance really kicked in with its democratization, and you and I have both been enthusiasts around this, there was a point where I felt that digital finance was being presented to me as something done by experts. And expertise is great, but actually I like getting my hands dirty. I like to be able to get to it. And for me, what I absolutely loved was getting the point, for example, of Power BI. I was actually saying this at a Microsoft event not long ago, and seeing how that allowed everyone who had the inclination, everyone who had the willingness to get into it and produce stuff which they could never have dreamt of doing 6 months before even. Mm-hmm. It started off as something which was kind of bizarre and huge and difficult and expert. Suddenly, people were doing it, and pioneers, you were one of them, were driving through it. And then beautifully people were working together to pass on those skills and make it happen. And what I absolutely loved about it is the essence of what happens in digital finance, which is a very broad term. But the essence is that we get the power of the digital tools that we have to do the really boring work. That's one side of it, to do the really boring work and get that out of the way. So the joy of bots, I remember just being mesmerized the first time I went to the unit in Bangalore where bots were being created at the beginning of the thing, and seeing it working. Look what it's doing. This is stuff which everyone hates doing, and it's doing it. It was fabulous. And then we also made those really complex initially. Then we realized that actually this is just an extension of a macro. So you get all these other points between macro and full-scale bot, which democratize this whole way of turning the drudgery, the boring, repetitive, senseless stuff, which occupied an awful lot of finance historically, of getting that done by machines or virtual machines which don't care about getting bored. Now that's great, so let's get some of the rubbish out. What then really struck me, and I thought that was wildly exciting, because when you get the rubbish out of the way, then you can start doing interesting things. But what are the interesting things you can do? Well, we can carry on doing what we've done before and making endless slides of stuff we don't, just stuff. Got 72 slides, I'm going to present them all to you, whether you want them or not. That was kind of, sheer volume was something which was important. What I loved about the democratization of the analytical tools was that it allowed people, we spoke about creativity, it allowed finance people who understood that language of numbers to engage with a scale of database, a scale of data, which they could never have been able to manipulate before. And to produce insights which were completely unforeseen insights. And it also kind of crashed through functional boundaries. So working with a fabulous colleague who came from a market research background, and we kind of grabbed into the finance area, which then we realized wasn't a finance area. It was a company area. It was a total company area. And you then get the brilliance when you get it right, that instead of just saying, this is finance data, and we're just going to look top to bottom of the P&L, balance sheet, cash flow, and nothing to do with us. You can then see how's that correlated with customer service. Or is there any causality between those and between your stock levels and your customer service? And you can manage those massive amounts of data to create a much more vivid and insightful view of what's actually happening in the company. And this is one of those magical things. You create insights which you would have thought was impossible a year ago. Impossible, remember. And you do that using tools which you didn't expect to be able to use.
You didn't expect.
The unexpected. Yeah. And so for me, I felt that digital finance was absolutely living what I was about. The other thing that I loved about it, at a really deep personal level, was it forced a humility onto me of realizing that just in terms, frankly, of both capability and will to learn, I'd rather be learning those jazz chords than learning how to really use Power BI properly. So in terms of where I wanted to be applying my brain, I thought me being an operator of this, me being an executor of this, that's not a good investment of time. What I loved was then that it not only democratized those acts, it democratized the whole structure. And we worked together on this closely, that we reversed the traditional model that wisdom lies with the guys with the shocking white beards. Felt I should get one. Which was previously, and it was guys, tragically for the most part, but sat with age almost, experience being what it was all about. And I absolutely loved that what we did was say, it doesn't matter where you are in the business, that if you have the instinct to get into this and to dig into it and to work your way through it, you're going to bring insights, which probably my 35 years of experience I'm going to bring. And when I'm sitting there saying, well, and what you have to realize is that I've seen this before, and when it happened, it was 7 years ago in Ghana, there's actually someone who's going to say, yeah, all right. I may only have been in the business for 18 months, but actually this is the data. I've graphed it for you here, and you can see this is the correlation. That is what we can expect. I've done some sensitivities on it, and even if I'm 20% wrong, it still has a good payback. And I'm stuck. So what I loved was that it turned that traditional business pyramid on its head. And that actually it didn't matter where you were in the business. Your seniority didn't matter, that everyone had a voice. And that was how we made the whole digital finance work. We did it by saying, this is open to everyone, that if you love this, then you get a say in how it works. You get a say in how we develop it. You get a say in how we use it. And it released energy. It released understanding in the business, which I think nothing else could have done. So for me, that's digital finance I found so exciting in terms of that change, revolution, turning things on their heads, taking things further forward than we could ever expected before. The change management was very difficult.
Exactly. I was going to ask you about the change management, because it's not easy to get everyone excited, and it's like human nature that people, they don't get excited for the change, especially this is what they used to do before, and especially in the finance function, because this is how we used to do for X number of years everywhere. So if you come with a disruptive thinking and say that we need to do it the other way around, you need to upscale your skill, you need to learn something new. This has not to be done anymore. That will be done by automated process. And you need to learn a new skill to do something else that serve as a value. This is not an easy journey. So how do you manage the change management associated with that in business, and how to link it to life as well? Because if you look at the current situation, we have everything new updates in the global economy, and the world now is more disruptive every year compared to before. The pattern of the changes is getting faster and faster every single day. So let's speak about the change management professionally and how we can link it to personal life as well.
Great question. And I have to say another question which touches on a frankly humbling experience. Because for me, we've discussed a bit about my personality flaws, that break everything, revolution, off we go. And so I found that what I was doing was talking to some people who loved this, and of course got the feedback, the bubble, the other feature we're talking about in this kind of new, highly connected world. I got reflected back that this enthusiasm is great. Other people really hated my enthusiasm and believed that I was doing this for cost cutting, that they were in some way being badly treated, and were really unhappy about it, quite simply, and then didn't participate. And that was a lesson for me, that actually let's change everything, get these skills, that's going to give you happiness, forget everything you've done before. Short soundbite messages were really unconstructive for some people. And in that context, that's part of the other reason that I felt it needed to be democratized, because we have other people who are much more good at introducing softer change, and we know some of them. And so I kind of stepped back from that crusading, if you're not in this thing, get out of my sight, which I hope I never said at any point, but that sense that you're either like this or there's nothing there, and tried to shift it to a position where people had the space to reflect, and that I should delegate that change. So it came from people who maybe were more had better empathy with those feelings and can make it work. So I think it's maybe a slightly odd response to a question about change management, which so many business books portray as a process. But one of my deep beliefs is that actually leadership starts with empathy and reflection, because you can't have empathy unless you actually have some self-knowledge to see whether the connection is taking place. And I think that probably remains. I haven't worked in conventional finance now for nearly a couple of years. But I think that will remain a challenge as this process continues and accelerates. Interestingly enough, I love language. Probably evident to anyone who's listening. I love the way in which words unfold. So I find this whole chat CPT thing not coming anywhere near
Exactly.
me. I don't want a AI writing what I'm going to be saying. I want to sit, and I either want to type it, which is quicker, or maybe I want to get my nice fountain pen and work through it. So in that respect, I recognize I'm one of those, and I will need to be led through this whole thing in a gentle way to kind of tolerate that sense of AI becoming the first draft. And to me, that's what I do. I want to. So, finally, too late, I can identify with the people who are saying, that's what I do. And you're saying it's rubbish and useless and a waste of time and doesn't have value. Yeah, I apologize here publicly to those I may have given that impression to.
But you love to deal with the unexpected. And ChatGPT is unexpected as we speak now. The number of users in ChatGPT in 5 days equivalent to many other platforms took like years to get users out of that. And it is particularly tapping on your point about the language and how to articulate that. I'm just reflecting on the ChatGPT, on the unexpected. You should be more excited on how to get out of ChatGPT. The impossible. You make something unexpected out of that. You get value out of that. But I just want to go back to finance for a moment.
This one was just about to get way out of control.
I'm trying to get the control of the discussion, so I'm taking one direction and go back another direction. So within this effort, you did so much effort for digital finance. You were extremely passionate about the digital finance and the change associated with digital finance. For non-finance users or for non-finance people background, did this unlock any value in your point of view? Do you see it as disruptive? It worth the effort behind doing the change within the finance and convert it into more digital finance? What is the value associated with that effort for non-finance background?
I think the value comes in some of those processes which were painful before. So anyone who has ever been involved in getting an invoice paid in a business, especially in the days when that was done on paper and paper matching of POs and invoices and contracts and all those things. It's a horrible process. Maybe there are people who get joy from it. If there are, I salute you. But in essence, it was a piece of work which often created noise. I used to have suppliers calling me up who hardly knew me to complain about my personal holding back of their payments when it was just this manual system was not able to keep up with it. And I think in some ways what digital finance does something quite odd. So on the one hand, it creates a black box. I think the other thing that it does create rules, which means that you actually don't need to understand the black box. Whereas I must say still with some of my clients, I need to understand the black box of how their organization works so they actually pay me. Because unless I can get to that person, then it takes a long time. Whereas what is magical about, ought to be magical about digital finance, if you follow the simple rules, and these are simple rules, it all happens non-touch. You don't actually have to call. It's on the day you expect to get paid, you get paid. And so it's a bit like where we started, discipline and happiness maybe, that I think what should be great for non-finance people about digital finance is that the disciplines which it imposes allow you to arrive at results much more straightforwardly just by making the little personal sacrifice of understanding those disciplines or those rules to get there. It allows you to do things yourself, which is one of the striking things. And let's get back to this idea that finance is adding up, taking away, multiplying and dividing. That part of the issue before was that we finance people behaved like priests, and that you were only allowed behind the curtain where all the information was if you were particularly nice to us. And even then, it wasn't guaranteed, otherwise people would exploit it too much. And so I think there's a fabulous step happening in those barriers being broken down, in particular since as we said before, that gap between some of your supply, for example, market share, revenue, customer service, it's pretty obvious that those three interact.
Definitely.
And then you can strap all kinds of other things on around it. And before, the idea of doing that, you would have given up in disgust on capitalism and gone to live at the top of a mountain rather than try and do that with traditional information systems. But now, it's there. You can make those connections. You can choose your data sets, combine them together. If you're interested in it, you can do it. And I think that takes this slightly unhelpful mystique, mystery out of how finance works, because it's just more numbers, in the same way as market share numbers or in the same way as customer service numbers. And so I think in a sense we almost demolish finance in some ways and turn it into, and this was my dream, I'm not quite sure where it is now, and my dream in growing on from digital finance was that you just had analytics. And actually what you want there are people who understand all of the business levers. Maybe some are more functional experts, some are more geographic experts, but you have people who together can combine all of the business data to create absolutely phenomenal insights. And I guess I stopped before that became too much of a reality, which is how it should be. There need to be next generations to take this on. That's another important realization. But I think that's what people who work in business have not really been exposed to finance. I think forget about it being finance. It's kind of common sense that this stuff is just what you sell and how much of it. And this stuff is just what that cost. It's not. And then embrace that and think, what can you bring to it? As you look at this, what do you think ought to sit? You're beautifully at the moment in what you're publishing, setting out the P&L and explaining it. Maybe if you work in sales or you work in marketing, you can have something else in your P&L.
True.
Maybe you want to start it with market share.
True.
Maybe you want to start it with customer service. Maybe you want to start with your customer stock levels.
True.
It's possible. It's easy now. You can do it. You can get together with other people and do it together and build on that. And wow, what a fantastic opportunity.
That's a disruptive P&L, Imagine starting the P&L not from the volume, starting the P&L from the market share, customer service. It will be relevant for all the other stakeholders. That's a beautiful statement, James. So, having saying that, because we're running out of time, I think that's the key point. So, being a senior person for finance, before that, so you used to see all the other side of the coin everywhere. So, in your career, which is majority finance. You did one role which is related to managing a business as a managing director. Yeah. Now, even after having your own business, now you're suffering from the payment of the finance as well. So now you used to be the one that customer are chasing you for the payment for some time, and now you're chasing for your payment on the other side. Yeah. So you used to see the other side of the coin every time. Has this changed your mind and how finance should operate and add value when you were playing the managing director, where you have your partner as a finance and you have certain expectation to support you to grow and manage the overall business?
That's a real insight that you're setting out, and absolutely. Because there has always been, I think, a temptation for finance to see themselves as the scorekeepers, the judges, the policemen. We never count beans. That's just a myth. But scorekeepers, judges, policemen, and something counters. And that actually gives this kind of sense of actually, we know. You didn't do that very well. Oh, I knew that was going to happen. Yeah, you've missed. I knew you were going to miss. Yeah, these conversations really take place. And I found that as a CEO, what I wanted from finance was that not that on the 1st of the month or the 2nd of the month, or even less on the 11th of the month, someone said, this is what happened, and this is why we missed. I wanted that on the 10th of the month, they're already saying, this is what has happened so far. This is not looking great, and we don't think it's going to get better. And I've spoken to my colleague in sales and my colleague in marketing about it. This is our collective view. But this is going brilliantly. We think if we put a bit more behind this, that will compensate for what's missing here. And I felt that I saw finance doing that quite well strategically. Strategy is easy in the end, it's just charts. But that thinking was working well strategically, but it wasn't working well operationally. What I wanted was the people who are analytical to be getting the business by the back of the neck and steering it and saying, if we're going to miss here, let's look at where else can we get it from? Are we going to cut some costs? Are we not going to spend some advertising? Or are we going to get some more revenue somewhere else and cover that? And if that's going that well, let's take a bit of a risk in terms of our profit, but even more money behind it and see just how far we can take it. Now, I didn't feel finance doing that, getting in and really holding on to what was happening. You can see the imagery. And that's what I wanted from operational finance, was that, in this sense, they weren't finance. I often speak about revelation as a CEO of learning the language of sales and how you set up a sales rep's call and what you measure. So how many lines have you sold per call? What are the value of the lines? What are the key red lines that they actually have to deliver? And when you look at all that, there's this beautiful analytical structure, which you can tune. If you track it every day, you can't guarantee landing your targets. You can get pretty close. So I wanted if I want anyone in finance is dealing with sales, they must speak sales fluently. And if someone is dealing with brands, they must speak brands fluently. If someone's working in retail, they must speak retail fluently. So it's, in a sense, it's another language. Each of the functions in a business is another language. And finance should feel they have an obligation to speak the language. They're a guest in the country. If you're finance working in sales, you're a guest of the sales team. So if you're a guest in another country, you must speak at least partly the language, ideally fluently. And what that then allows you to do is to really drive performance, because each of you ideally, sales guys, all sales guys understand the numbers. They're just pretending when they don't. Most sales guys have a really good grasp of numbers. And so when you get salespeople who get finance and finance people who get sales, then you get magic. Then you get businesses which absolutely fly. And I think that's one of the absolutely key things in this is, it gets back to people talking. How do you spark each other? How do you bring your different perspectives together to create something which neither of you could ever have thought about alone? It's that creating something which previously seemed impossible, using the unexpected of talking someone else's language. They're not expecting you to talk their language.
You see, your purpose impacted me.
It's getting a bit cheesy, actually. Exactly. I will stop this. I'll change my purpose to something different.
So the last section that we have for this amazing, beautiful podcast, being a finance leader for so many years. So people, they expect so much wisdom from you when it comes to personal finance. So you'll find friends and friends of friends and relatives asking you, James, what do you think? What should we do? Do you have any advice for me from a personal financing point of view? Do you have a philosophical answer to that question? How do you address this question whenever you get a question for that?
Well, I think for many, my answer is unexpected, which is that my personal finances, if they were left to me, would be chaos. And I think, how do we take that, this is the model, and turn it into something which is useful? So I'm just not very interested in it. I can't explain why. It's not something that drives me. And I think the advice that I would give is to understand what you can bring to your personal finances. So let me use myself as an example, because it's not a particularly impressive model. So I'm not very interested. And I occasionally start doing something and I just lose interest. So first thing, I need to delegate mine. So what is interesting is that once I get a financial advisor, I'm really interested in holding them accountable. So what I get is them telling me about how my personal finances are working. And then I get into that and I dig and ask questions. That works for me. I'm really interested in that. I'm not interested in working it out myself. I couldn't be a day trader. If I was a day trader, I would be out on the street selling matches. It would be absolutely hopeless. It just doesn't resonate for me. So one thing is, I know I need to delegate it. I also know what I'm looking for. And I think this is the crucial thing is, I'm not sure that what I'm saying is very profound. What I want is financial freedom. I want my life to be as unconstrained as possible. And therefore I want to know what constraints I need to put on myself so that I can live that life. Does that make sense?
Perfect sense. I see what you're saying.
So in order to be free, you have to know where your limits are.
Yes.
So what I'm really interested in is, the way in which I've approached it is, well, probably decades of neglect was the starting point. But then once I really started thinking about it, understanding that I'm going to make a mess of this if I do it myself, that's not the right place to go. And what I actually want is fairly high degree of predictability, only moderate risk, and I will then live with the consequences of that and tailor my life to fit within it in a way which still gives me freedom. So that's what I then got to, was a message, I think is quite a clear message that I can give someone else, and we can then debate to work out how best my investments should be. Now, other people love it and are absolutely brilliant at going home and trading and doing all kinds of things that I don't even know what they're called. That's the right thing to do for them. And maybe they have a very high risk threshold. They want to up for a very high return and happy to take the risk. They get it. I don't get that. But if they understand that, that's what they should be doing, because they will then make a success of that. But they need to be reflective. In all of this, you need to be reflecting, is what I think is my strategy actually working? Some people are somewhere between the two. Everyone's in different places. So I think my advice to someone who is setting out in personal finance is recognize it's not going to go away. So the first thing you need to do is think about it. In particular, think about your risk profile, your risk appetite. If you have a partner, if you have a family, make sure that that's a shared view that you have. And if it's not, that you've discussed it. If it is, that you've discussed it, so you know where you're going. And then work out how best to realize that. Does one of you in a marriage have the energy to drive it all themselves, and accept that the other person maybe doesn't have that interest and that capability, and so you don't subsequently argue about it? Get the conditions clear and make it work, and talk about it. Keep the lines of communication open. My case, delegate to a professional and then be a beast to them when it doesn't work. And in other cases, maybe people who absolutely love it and spend large parts of their day, it becomes their hobby, and wow, I admire that, but I can't do it. And so do that, and again, make sure that that works with those around you, so that everyone can have that psychological peace. Because in the end, financial peace, or a degree of financial security, is, I suspect, what pretty well all of us crave. Some people are happy for it to be more risky than others. That's great. Again, that's the richness of humanity and why we have so many financial instruments. I think that's the only useful advice I can give. And you're getting no stock tips from me. And if you do, don't follow them. But this process of reflection. And so what I do now is dip in, not quite monthly, probably quarterly, dip in and also reflect about my investment strategy. Really, I've got a super guy I'm working with who also likes then the analytics and pushing it, and kind of exposes me to new ideas. And that really works for me as a methodology around it. But other people would hate it. But you've got to have that reflection which is taking place, so that you don't find you've gone down a path that you're not comfortable with. You have to hold yourself accountable for how you're approaching it.
I think that's a very high degree of self-reliance, where you know exactly what I am into and I am not capable into to do. And the minute you have this self-reliance, you just delegate. You know the importance of having this as well. So you're not neglecting the whole objective. You know that this is important. I have to work on this, but this is not my thing. Then delegate.
Yes.
So that require a high degree of self-reliance, because other people, they know that this is important. I'm not into it, but I have to do it myself, and then they fail. So that's the advice I see out of your answer, James. I think that's pretty much it for today. I think we need another episode longer.
We've still got lots more to talk about.
Exactly. Really. So I didn't finish all the questions, but that was one of the best ever discussion I have ever had. The level of energy and wisdom that you shared, that's extremely important for everyone, and for me personally. I got charged for energy for another 10 years, I think, after this discussion. Thank you very much for having this. And I wish you loved the discussion as well. And looking forward for another episode as well. I think we need to have another episode with you, James.
That would be great. I've absolutely loved the conversation. Thank you so much. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. And super to see you again, and looking forward to the next time.
Thank you, James. Thank you.